3.
Hello, my name is Robert Bailey.
Where and when were you born, Mr. Bailey?
I was born in Michigan in 1921.
So how old are you right now?
97.
Do you feel like you're 97?
Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't.
Physically, what is it like to be 97?
Well, you have to find that you're slowing down. You can't do anything like you used to do. And with me, I'm bedridden, so I can't do woodworking. I like to do woodworking as a hobby. Did that all my life as a hobby.
What branch of the service were you in during World War II?
I was in the combat engineers.
What division were you in?
I was in the 94th Division.
And what combat engineer battalion were you in?
319th.
And what company?
B.
And what was your specific role in Company B?
Well, most of the time I was responsible for my part of keeping the roads open, and we did a lot of work destroying pillboxes.
And what was the highest rank you achieved by the time you left the service?
I was first lieutenant.
What was the highest award for valor you received in combat?
Silver Star.
And were you ever wounded, Mr. Bailey?
Yes, I was.
Where on your body were you wounded?
I had a rifle bullet go through my right ankle and out the bottom of my foot.
Do me a favor, Mr. Bailey. Just put your head down a little bit. Perfect. Okay, so Mr. Bailey, you mentioned that you were born in Michigan. Did you grow up in Michigan?
Yes.
Where in Michigan did you grow up?
After 2 years on a farm, my dad was an engineer, and we moved to Detroit.
So talk to me about growing up in Detroit. What kind of things did you do for fun as a kid?
Oh, we used to do everything. We played hide and seek, and we used to also like to ring doorbells and go when they come at the door. There wasn't anybody there because we were hiding, and just little trivial things, really. But my main interest was woodworking.
When you were growing up, what did you want to do with your life before the war broke out?
Oh, I was always going to be an engineer.
What was your father's profession?
My dad was a mechanical engineer, graduated from the University of Michigan in 1914.
And can you tell me, what are your memories of growing up in the Great Depression, Mr. Bailey?
My family, we had it better than most because my dad only had to take a 10% reduction in pay, and he was able to help my aunt, his sister, because in Detroit, well, my aunt, she was a bacteriologist, and she taught bacteriology at Cass Technical High School, which was the only technical high school in Detroit. And she never married. Teaching was her life.
But, growing up, were there any specific instances, things that you saw or heard around you that really made you realize there's a Great Depression going on?
Yes, there's a shortage of things. There was the gasoline rationing, and people were asked to save all the grease, or they make dynamite, I guess, out of it. And my aunt, if you were a teacher in Detroit, you got paid in script because they didn't have enough money to pay him regular money, so they printed script. And my dad was able to get script from his sister and give her the regular money because he found he could pay his taxes with script.
And when you were a teenager and you and your buddies would get together, what kind of mischief did you guys get into?
Well, I was big on making gunpowder, and I guess you might say I was one of the first pipe bomb maker. I used to take a little aluminum tubing, about ½ inch in diameter, and fill it with gunpowder, and that aluminum, when I could take a coffee can and shoot it about 50 feet in the air. But I was always interested in chemistry.
What about on Halloween? What kind of pranks would you guys pull?
I don't think I ever did anything malicious.
Did you ever soap any windows?
No, never did. It's too hard to get it off, because I had to sometimes take it off of my mother's windows, and so I knew better than to soap windows.
What high school did you go to?
I went to Cooley High School.
And what year did you graduate?
I graduated in 1938.
When you were in high school, did you go steady with anyone?
No.
Did you date at all?
Not in high school.
What about university?
I only had one girlfriend for about a year, and then we fell apart. We were never real serious. I think she was, but I wasn't. And so I was always kind of a loner. I used to like to go to the movies by myself or do a hockey game or something like that. I didn't have to have somebody with me.
What university did you go to?
Michigan State. It was college then, because it was only, when I first started, I think we only had about 4,600 in the school. There's probably 46,000 now or more.
Did you take ROTC in school?
Yes, I took junior high school, ROTC in high school, and then I took 4 years of ROTC in college.
What was the main reason that you took ROTC?
I just wanted to be around the Army. I liked the Army.
How did you hear about the attack on Pearl Harbor?
What?
How did you hear about the attack on Pearl Harbor?
Oh, I was hitchhiking back from Detroit to Michigan State, which is at Lansing, Michigan. And I hadn't heard anything about it, but the car that I was in, this man and his wife picked me up, and I heard it over the radio.
What was that like to hear that your country had been attacked?
It sounded almost unbelievable.
And take me through, after Pearl Harbor, how did that change your life? What ended up happening to you?
It didn't change my mind.
No, your life. How did it change your life?
Pearl Harbor, it didn't then, because I wasn't that close to it, you know.
But after Pearl Harbor, you knew that when you graduated, you would automatically go into the service, right?
No, that's another little part of it. I was supposed to get a direct commission as a second lieutenant after graduation, but we had one thing that we didn't have. We didn't have a summer camp, 6 weeks in the Army, which was one of the requirements. So we were told as a class that if we wanted to, we could go to Detroit and enlist. And I did, and all the rest of my classmates. we went down to Detroit and enlisted as privates, and so that meant that we could finish that last semester in college, and we got board and room, which I didn't have to pay for anymore, and we also got $50 a month.
And so when you graduated college, you were a private?
Yep.
So how did you end up getting your second lieutenant commission?
I had to go through basic training, 16 weeks, and then I got to go to OCS, and I graduated from OCS as a second lieutenant. But I wasn't as a combat engineer. I got my first commission as an artillery officer, anti-aircraft, and was sent to California, and there was a big pool of about 1,000, as I recall, people or second lieutenants that had graduated as second lieutenants. But what they did is I was only there 10 days, and they went through the roster to pick out everybody that had an engineering degree, and I was one of them. And so, only being in California for 10 days, I was shipped back to Fort Belvoir in Virginia, where after 6 weeks, I suddenly became a combat engineer.
Mr. Bailey, do me a favor. Turn your head to your left a little bit, please. A little more. Perfect. Can you take me through basic training? Can you take me through a typical day? You wake up early.
You get up early, you go through calisthenics. Well, first you had roll call to see if everybody was there. And then you did calisthenics, and you had your 4 meals, and go through obstacle courses, and also sometimes I have problems. I don't think as good as I used to. Go on hikes and shoot in the range, just practice, see how good a shot you were. But actually, I liked the Army. People like to complain about the food, but I thought it was okay. I had no complaints. I gained weight. Never got over 150 pounds, but I gained weight in the Army. I liked the food.
And could you also talk about the skills that you learned at OCS when it comes to being a combat engineer officer?
Well, you learn to set off explosives, and my experience there was only blowing up pillboxes.
And take me through how is one supposed to go about blowing up a pillbox?
Well, first, the biggest thing, you have to take them, and pillboxes had protection from another pillbox. In other words, each pillbox could see where the other pillbox was, and so if you attacked it, they could shoot you when you were making the assault. So what you had to do, you had to find out where they all were positioned, and then you had to take all of them at one time.
And would you be using explosives, or?
Well, the first thing they did is the Army or the Air Force would drop bombs, but which wasn't too effective, because the pillbox is so made so they're not going to collapse. And and let's see, I've lost my train of thought.
You were talking about the pillboxes.
Yeah, you had to take them all at once. Well, as a platoon leader, as a combat engineer, we had 2 flamethrowers, and the Army would assault the pillboxes, but they all had to be assaulted at one time. And then when you got up there, we had 2 flamethrowers, and we put the flames on the openings in the front of the pillbox where they were shoot out of. And so if you had flames there, they couldn't shoot out. It gave you a chance to get up there and maybe throw a grenade in that hole. And effectively, it was just assault the pillbox and take the people in there. And then Eisenhower gave the command that after the pillbox was taken, they had to be blown up that day, because the Germans, well, the Americans had taken a pillbox, one of the Germans, and it was such nice inside there that some of our troops occupied that pillbox, and the Germans counterattacked and killed I don't know how many of the soldiers in it, but they retook it. And so Eisenhower said they had to be destroyed the day they were taken. And so that was a big part of my job.
Destroying the actual pillbox?
Yes. Blow it up.
Where would you position the explosives to most effectively destroy the pillbox and make it collapse?
Usually, well, they all did. They had a mortar in one of the floors, and sometimes if it was 2-story pillbox, it would be up on the second. And if it was a 3-story pillbox, the mortars were all stored up next to the mortar. And did you ever see those Coca-Cola bottle dispensers where they used to be on a rack?
Mm-hmm.
And they'd go up one at a time. Well, they had that, and they could automatically load the pillboxes with mortar shells. And they had a periscope, so they could look out and see what was going on. And so you always put your explosives up near the mortar, because that's where they stored all their mortars. And so if you had, like this one I blew, took 2,000 pounds of TNT and put it near, I don't know how many tons of mortars there were, but we set 2-minute fuses and just ran and closed up the back door that was steel of the pillbox, and just ran far enough away because it would blow pieces of concrete 10 feet in diameter, all reinforced concrete. They were big. It took a lot of explosives to blow one of them up.
And Mr. Bailey, moving forward, can you take me through how did you end up joining the 94th Division?
I was just assigned to it.
Where did you join them, though?
Let's see, I think my first time that I joined them was in Mississippi.
So you went overseas with the division then?
Yes.
So after you joined them in Mississippi, take me through how do you guys end up going overseas?
Well, we were a combat division, And so that was our job.
But I'm saying, physically, how did you guys get overseas?
Going, oh, I look forward to it.
But how did you get there? On a ship?
Oh, yes, went over on the Queen Elizabeth. Took us 5 days on the Queen Elizabeth because we zigzagged back and forth. But we made it in 5 days, and we were faster. The Queen Elizabeth was faster than the submarines were, any foreign subs. And so the only time we ever had protection that we were aware of was when we left out of New York, went down the Hudson River. There were aircraft over the ship, and as soon as that first day, they left us, and we were on our own. So there wasn't any convoy with us. We were all by ourselves. And then the last day, getting in, we went into Scotland in the Firth of Clyde, and then we had planes over us because that's when you were most vulnerable to a sub.
And so after you guys arrive in Scotland, where do you go?
Went to England for about 6 weeks, I think it was, where we got all of our supplies and ready to go across in the invasion in Normandy.
And take me through, when you were in England, what do you remember about the German air attacks? From the German planes or the German rockets?
Yeah, it wasn't too bad when we were there because we went on Utah Beach when we did invade. We went in 94 days after D-Day. So when we went in on the beach, everything was calm there. You could see where there'd been a lot of activity. You could see the masts sticking up, or smokestacks from some of the ships that had been sunk. But it was quiet. It wasn't bad at all.
But I'm saying, before you left England to go to France, do you remember the buzz bombs?
Oh, yes. I saw one. Only one. And they were interesting because they sounded like an outboard motor. And they would be coming across it overhead, not too high. And they coasted. The little engine would start up and give it a boost, and then they'd be quiet. And that was what terrified the people in London, was they never knew if it was going to continue on, or if when it stopped it was going to come down. And I only saw one.
What do you remember about the destruction that you saw in London?
Well, I never was actually in London. We were outside London.
Okay. And when you were at your guys' base, do you remember German planes coming over and dropping bombs, or just the buzz bombs?
Just the buzz bomb.
So you mentioned that you guys landed on Utah Beach 94 days after D-Day.
Yeah.
Eventually, the 94th Division goes to Brest, where the submarine pens were.
They went where?
My understanding is that the 94th Division went to where the submarine pens were.
Yeah, that was at Lorient. Where they parked their subs there, it was in Lorient. And the other city, we occupied part of Lorient, and then the other was at
Saint Nazaire?
Saint Nazaire.
So, can you take me through your first experience in combat?
My combat consisted of a very, very short period of time. When we were in Germany, I ran into an ambush. And it happened that the ambush was in a small woods, and the Germans were surrendering at that time. This was late in the war. And they were surrendering, and so I ran into him. Well, I can tell you the whole story. There was a bridge that had been partially destroyed. It was wood, and our company, we were supporting 94th Division tanks, and the they had to have part of that bridge repaired, and so I stayed with one squad at the bridge, and I had my platoon sergeant, and I had a carpenter, and the rest of them just to the squad, and we repaired the bridge. Now by that time it was dark, and so I told the rest of the company to go ahead, that we would catch up with them. And as it turns out, it got really dark, and so we were traveling, our vehicles all blackout. Came up to this edge of this small woods, and there were two Germans challenged us. In fact, we had to stop because they'd dropped a tree over the road. And the Germans said, one of them said, "Surrender, Americans." Well, when I heard that, I just tumbled to my right out of the Jeep, because, they didn't have doors on them. And, but my driver, Carl DeBoard, fortunately for me, the two challenging soldiers were on his side. And so he tried to come across the seats to get over where I was. Well, they were perfect targets, so there was one on each side. I shot both of them with a .45, the one that my wife had sent me. And then I was just in the process of reloading shells into my clip with a .45 when a rifleman, he had to be off to my right at an angle, shot me. And that got my attention. And so I let out a big yelp. It felt like you stepped on a 220 electric wire. And at that time I thought, boy, I better get out of here, get back. And I should have started back when the rest did, when I yelled, because I was intense on shooting and didn't show very good judgment when in dark, the Germans could see where the flame, or they could see where I was because of the gun, and I should have moved, and then I wouldn't have gotten shot. But anyway, I found myself then all by myself up there with the Jeep, and Of course, I didn't care about the Jeep then, just wanted to get back. And so I started crawling back, and by that time, all shooting, it was quiet. And I crawled back, and I saw somebody behind the dual of a 6x6, and I went out there, and it was one of my men, and he seemed to be sort of in a daze. His name was Orville, I'll think about it in a minute. Anyway, he was in kind of a daze. When he saw me, he said, "Is that you, Lieutenant?" And I said, "Yep." And I said, "Who's that out in the middle of the road?" And he says, "I don't know," but I said, "Let's go see." So we crawled out there, and it was my platoon sergeant had been killed. It was from one of the potato mashers that I heard go off. A piece of the steel went right through his heart. And when I saw that wasn't anything we could do for him, I told Gronfield, that's it, Gronfield. I told him, let's see what we can get out of here. And so both of us crawled, got down in the ditch and started crawling back, because we had passed an engineering group back about a mile. So I knew that's the way we wanted to go. And I got, let's see, we got up to a point in the ditch, and we were challenged again by a German. Well, the miracle was that Orville Grenfield, he was German. I didn't know that. He was just a very quiet guy in the company, and I had no idea. And he always did what he was supposed to be doing, and so he didn't give me any trouble, and I didn't give him any problem. And so he was German, and he was raised in a German family, and growing up until he went in the Army, that's all they spoke in the house was German. So his mind just instantly was right back, and he answered the German that challenged us up there. He says, told him, "No, we're chasing the Americans." And we just kept right on crawling. And we got by that spot. And so we stayed down in the ditch crawling, and we got down there maybe a couple hundred feet, and I said, "We got to get going faster than this." And I said, he says, "Can you walk?" And I said, "I think I can," because when that bullet went through the bones and all nerves, my whole foot was numb. And so I said, "You help me, and I think we can." So he helped me get up. I put my arm around his neck, and the two of us hobbled back up about a mile until we got to the other engineering group. And at that time, we were challenged again by our people then. And they wanted to know the password, and I said, "We're Americans." I said, "I don't know the password." But so whoever challenged us said, "Advance carefully, slowly." And so we did, and then we got first aid. And the next day flew me to England to a hospital.
All right, so before we go back and talk about the Silver Star incident again, I wanted to backtrack a little bit. You mentioned that your first experiences overseas was in Lorient and Saint Nazaire. Can you talk to me about your memories of what you were doing in Lorient and Saint Nazaire?
Saint Nazaire?
Yeah, what you and your combat engineer battalion were doing. Can you take me through what you remember about that?
Yeah, we were in Saint Nazaire in 1945. No.
44.
44. In 1944. And there we ran a water station taking water out of the Nantes. It was at Nantes. And we took water out of the river and purified it for the city. And I'd rotate a squad at a time. That was just luxury duty. Of course, they liked that because in the evening they could go to the bars or do what they wanted to do. And so it was a choice thing to do. And so that's what we did there. And then when the Germans were getting ready to bulge start, and we got pulled out of there and headed up into Germany.
So, what do you remember about the Siegfried Line?
Siegfried Line?
Yes, sir.
Oh, that was a terrible place. They had deep ditches around where we were, and we couldn't have been, the division couldn't have been put in a worse place than where we had to go through. And we tried to go through the Siegfried Line twice and weren't successful. And I heard one general tell the other general, I won't mention names, you better go this next time through or I'm going to relieve you of your command. And so the next time we did go, but they had dragon teeth all around and this deep ditch, and it was a terrible place to go. And that's where the pillboxes were too.
So it would just be a row of pillboxes?
They would be scattered along an area. I can't tell you how far apart they were, but several hundred yards between them. And like I said before, one could protect each one.
So by the time you got to the Siegfried Line, Mr. Bailey, were the Germans still occupying the pillboxes and firing down at you guys?
Oh, yes. That was part of trying to get through.
So what do you remember about taking on enemy fire from the German pillboxes?
It was just a lot of artillery, and it was just nasty.
And do you remember seeing flamethrowers being used on the Siegfried Line?
The flamethrowers?
Do you remember seeing the flamethrowers on the Siegfried Line?
Yeah, we used them there.
What do you remember seeing happen?
They were taken. We could take them. You had to assault them all at the same time. But first you had to locate them because they weren't just big flag up saying where they were, but they were mounds of dirt, and the mound of dirt would have maybe 6 or 7 or 8 feet of dirt on the top of the concrete, and there would be brush growing on those and all kinds of vegetation, so they just didn't stand out. You had to have scouts go out, and that was a job that we did some of that. And the Army, they did it their part, and so we had you located every one of them, and then you tried to take them all at the same time.
And you specifically, as a platoon leader, when you guys are trying to take a pillbox, what are you specifically doing, Mr. Bailey?
I was just there with them, but I didn't take part of any of that. I didn't handle a flamethrower or anything. I was just there supporting them.
And so, am I correct in saying when you were in Saint Nazaire and Lorient, you were doing the water purification? Did your combat engineer battalion get into any action in that area, or no?
Very little.
Okay.
We lost a few men, but not many. It was, the Germans were happy to be left alone, and they'd be a little skirmish once in a while. But they were the two places in France that were never taken during the war. They were German, or whoever wanted to occupy them, whether they were French or German. They didn't try to get out, and we didn't try to go in for them, because I guess General Eisenhower felt it wasn't worth the loss of men to try to do that, because they weren't bothering us and we weren't bothering them.
You mentioned, Mr. Bailey, that you had lost a few men in the Saint Nazaire and Lorient area. Those men who were killed, what happened to them?
They were, you mean, they were shot? Is that what you mean?
Well, I mean, were you guys on a patrol, or?
Just, well, then it was so quiet, you just walk around, and once in a while somebody would get shot.
Okay, I see. As a combat engineer, can you talk to me about your experiences against German landmines?
Yeah, landmines, yes. That was one thing you had to be careful of, because they had those shoot boxes. They were like a small box, and if you stepped on one and it exploded, it'd take your foot off. And we helped the infantry sometimes there. If there were going to be a big assault in the morning, sometimes we would run yellow tape out maybe a couple 100 yards, and we would probe to be sure there weren't any shoe mines or that any of our troops could hit. But then when they got to the end of the tape, well, then you didn't know what you were going to run into.
Did you personally ever have to disarm the mines?
Oh, we had to do that every morning. When we had camped, we put tripwires all around where we were located, and the tripwires were hooked up to a bouncing Betty, and if you hit that, it would bounce 4 or 5 feet in the air and explode, and it was a deadly piece of equipment. And the very first man we lost over there, he didn't follow the instructions right, and the pin had been pulled on the wire, and so if somebody just happened to be there when that went, it was bad news. But if you did it properly, you didn't have any trouble. And every once in a while in the night, one would go off, but you never knew whether it was a person, so you had to be prepared, or whether it was an animal. You know, it's the tripwire was up maybe 18 inches from the ground, And anything smaller than that, they could get under it. But if it was anything bigger or it was a person, they had to hit that wire, it was going to explode.
But Mr. Bailey, you had mentioned that the first time you lost a man from your outfit was from a mine?
Yes.
Were you there when it went off?
No. I was in the area, but I mean, I wasn't right there.
Did you go see him after he had stepped on it? I mean, did you?
No, he was, we just had to put him in a bag, send him home. You see the way the pillbox works, I mean the mine, there's something like it's like a cotter pin, and this goes in, and it's hooked to a wire. Well, the firing pin to set off the mine, it is clear. There's clearance there, but if something at night trips that wire, that the firing pin comes down and is stopped by that pin, and so it's safe to put it back in there again. But you're trained to take and feel real easy and see if that pill or that pin is free. If it's free, you know that the pin or the firing pin hadn't been tripped, because it's on the top of that and it would show some resistance. But he didn't do that and lost his life.
Do you remember his name?
No, I don't. No. I don't remember many of the people's names. I knew most of their names, of course, when we were there, but it's been so long, I know a few names.
No worries. Mr. Bailey, can you talk to me about your experiences under German artillery fire?
Well, we went through some terrific artillery fire, and one time apparently someone on the American side had called for fire or artillery when they were rushing an area, and either gave the wrong coordinates or something, because we inherited most of that fire. It would have been like what we call now friendly fire, but that was the worst artillery I was ever in, was our own.
What was that like, having shells going off around you?
It's terrifying. You lie on your stomach and you try to get down. You hope you could get underground, but and when an explosion comes, it's just like somebody takes and gives a great big push right on your back. You can feel a concussion. It actually it moves your body, it wants to.
And you mentioned that the most severe shelling was the American shells.
That time.
Were there casualties from those shells?
That I don't know.
What do you remember about the German mortars?
Well, they were, any of the thing you had, mortars or
the 88?
Yeah, they were all bad.
How long would German artillery barrages last, usually?
Oh, sometimes, as I remember, 5 or 10 minutes.
And is it like a sporadic shell here and there, or is it just continuous shelling?
It was continuous shelling wherever I was.
And can you talk about the noise? I mean, how loud is that?
Oh, well, it's like a stick of dynamite going off. It's very loud. In fact, a lot of the soldiers that are in the veterans hospitals are in there because of hearing. And you're eligible to go to a veterans hospital if you have a disability of 10% or more. And so it isn't, the soldiers that were running the Bofors and some of the artillery, it's loud when you're right there on top of them. They do have plugs that you can put in your ear, but you didn't always do that, or you didn't have time. And so a lot of the soldiers that are in the veterans hospitals are there and eligible because of hearing loss.
Can you talk to me, did you have any specific experiences against the German Luftwaffe? Were you ever strafed?
No.
And what about, did you ever see the German tanks in combat?
Not personally, no.
But as combat engineers, I know you mentioned that you guys would have to demine the German mines, but would you ever set up American mines?
Oh yes, we put out mines.
How would you go about doing that?
You do it the right way, and you make a drawing of where those mines are. So if you have to go back and get them, you know where to pick them up.
And usually how deep would you put the mine in the ground?
Oh, sometimes it would only be an inch or two, depending on what you were trying to get. If it was a heavy tank or something, you wanted it so that it would get the tank, you know, track. But if it was just like foot traffic, well, then you had those set shallow. But for heavy vehicles, so that just anything wouldn't set them off, they were deep, like maybe 6 inches.
What kind of strategies did you and your men use to camouflage the mines?
We didn't ever have to do that.
Really? What about the Germans? I mean, how would they camouflage their mines?
I just covered up is all.
So,
and a lot of times there wasn't. They didn't have any record. That was after the war. You found that out. Farmers plowing fields and everything. They every once in a while would set off a mine, and so there was no record. But you're supposed to make a record of where they are so you can take them up.
And when you're on the front lines, Mr. Bailey, I mean, what's it like not knowing if you're about to step on a mine? You know, if you're in enemy territory, are you always looking at the ground, or what do you do?
Yeah, you just ignore it and hope that you don't step on one. You can't stop. You can't be paranoid. You had to do the job. And I only had, well, one of the lieutenants had the other platoon. He set off a shoe mine and bruised his elbow or his arm.
Were you with him when that happened?
No.
Were there times that you provided first aid to the other, to wounded men around you?
No, we didn't have that job.
But with your company, Company B, was there always a medic with you guys?
No. No, we didn't have a medic assigned to the platoon.
So if you guys were out in the field and something happened to one of you, how do you get them back to the first aid station?
Well, you just have to go out and get them if you can. And you've probably seen that series MASH on TV. That kind of thing. You get them and take them into the MASH station.
And did you have any specific experiences against German snipers, Mr. Bailey?
No, never did.
But when you would go into these German towns, I mean, what's that like, not knowing if there's a bead on your head?
You didn't know. But normally, when they take a town, it was the army that takes the town, and we furnished any help that we could. But it was the army that was taking the towns, really.
Like the rifle companies.
Yes.
And what do you remember about the destruction done to the German towns and cities?
Oh, they devastated them. They were really torn up. And in Germany, they had beautiful trees. They did a lot of reforesting. They were all in rows, pretty trees, big trees. And when you artillery fire, and where you're in and one I remember distinctly was Camouflage woods. There was just nothing but sticks up in the air. The branches were gone. They just were terrible. And there were beautiful forests that they had.
When you had some of your experiences under German artillery fire, were you ever in the woods? You know, I mean, did you have any experiences with tree bursts when the shells would hit the trees?
Yes.
Pretend I don't know what a tree burst is. What is that, Mr. Bailey?
The nose of the shell is set. It can go down and hit the ground and explode, or it can go down just even under a little bit if you want and explode. Or if it's something up that hits a tree, it will explode. And I had a personal experience there. But the Army had just taken a small town, and I went up there ahead to make arrangements for lodging for the troops, because when we got into Germany, we had it better than we did in France, because in France you slept under apple trees in the snow. And so as soon as we took German towns, it was one of my responsibilities was to find housing for the men in the company. And this town had just been taken, and they ran wire from wherever their location was up to and put a telephone on the wall, and in that room there was a couch, and anytime you had a chance to get a little rest or sleep, you took advantage of that. And so let's see, anyway, the man had just run wire and put a telephone on the wall in the bedroom where I was, and outside that window was an apple tree. Well, some artillery shells came in, and one of them hit the tree and had a tree burst. And so that the shell broke into many little pieces, and one of them went right through the window, and some of them went through the wall of the house. And I had just laid down. I was going to get a little shut-eye if I could, and all in the same instant, the tree burst, and I just sat up, and boy, there was a piece of that shell shrapnel went right through the wall, and would have gone right through me if I had been laying in that, and it all happened in an instant. So I know all about tree bursts.
But Mr. Bailey, what would you say made you sit up?
The telephone rang.
I mean, do you feel that was fate, or I mean that's a pretty crazy coincidence?
Yep. Yeah. Put a signal corps man ran the wire, and he didn't any much more. Well, he was gone though, and he left, and I was there with a telephone and this nice couch, and it all happened in this all together in one series. The telephone rang on the wall. I sat just barely upright, and at that instant I got a tree burst, and that piece of shell went through the wall, and it would have gone right straight through me if I'd have been lying down.
How big would you say that piece of shrapnel was?
Oh, I could just look at the piece of the hole in the wall. It was probably 2 or 3 inches.
Gosh. I mean, that would have killed you most likely.
Oh, sure.
Mr. Bailey, do me a favor. Pretend I don't know anything about this. Could you tell me the story of your wife sending you the pistol?
Oh, yeah.
But take me through the beginning.
Yeah. General Patton came out with the orders that every soldier had to have his weapon with him. It didn't matter whether you were going to the latrine or you were in the mess hall or where you were, you had to have your weapon. Well, I wasn't issued an M1. I was issued a carbine. There's a lighter vehicle or a lighter gun than an M1. But anyway, I got tired. I thought, gee, I got to do something different than this. So I rode home and told my wife to go to a gun shop and buy me a .45. And so she did. She packaged it up like you would any package and sent it through the mail. And at first, I found out afterwards when I was wounded, because it was my gun, so I kept it. And when that, it's deviating from this. Mary Jo said, tell her about the Jeep. Well, the Jeep, I had a bottle of Cointreau. I don't know if you know what Cointreau is.
No.
French liqueur. Are you familiar with that?
I am now.
Yeah, well, it's a French liqueur. And I had a bottle, I don't know, I didn't drink at all back then. And I had that bottle in there. I had a beautiful P38, a German. It was the one that replaced the Luger, and then all my belongings. But I salvaged the gun, of course, mine, because I had it right with me. And but I lost the bottle of Cointreau and everything else in the Jeep. So that's what she was talking about, Cointreau.
But going back to the story of how you got the .45, well, why wouldn't the Army issue you a .45? I thought all officers had .45s.
No. Air Force do, I think, most all of them.
Okay.
Because, you wouldn't want a rifle in your cockpit of a fighter. But no, that's not so.
So if you had asked for a .45, they would not have given you one?
No, it wouldn't been issued.
So do you remember where you were when you got the 45? Were you already in combat, or was this back in England when you actually got it?
Oh no, this was, we were in, let's see, I think I was still in France, so before we'd gone into Germany. It was before the bulge, so.
Was it a special kind of pistol, or was it a regular 45?
Regular 45, Model M, Model 16, I think it's that number.
And so what did you end up using this 45 for?
That's what I shot those two Germans that were holding Carl de Gaulle board.
So the gun that she sent you, the pistol, saved your life?
Yes.
Did you tell her that in a letter, or did you tell her the full story when you came back to the States?
Oh, I don't remember. I don't remember.
Can you backtrack and can you take us through how you ended up meeting your wife?
How I met my wife? On a blind date. I met her on a blind date, and 6 months later we were married. Didn't waste any time back then. The war was on. I was scheduled to go overseas, and so we got married.
What was that like, being overseas and having a wife back home, knowing that there's a likely chance that you wouldn't come home?
You never knew. And everybody realized that, you know. No, a lot of, soldiers don't come back, but most of them did.
And can you take me through, your wife was pregnant when you left?
Yes.
How far along was she when you actually saw her the last time?
She was, well, let's see, my son was 6 months old when I first saw him. And I was overseas 9 months, roughly. So he was 6 months old when I saw him. So she was very pregnant when I left.
I mean, what was that like, finding out that you had become a father when you were overseas?
Oh, I liked that. I heard it. He was born on the 20th of December, and let's see, the 20th of December. And I didn't hear about it until 4 days later. And we were in a Quonset hut, having a meal, and I remember that really distinctly. And when I came home, my son, boy, he didn't like me at all, because he'd always been with my wife, but he got over that in a hurry.
When you came home, did you have difficulty readjusting to civilian life?
Not really. Being in the hospital, I was in a veterans hospital a year. And so it was sort of a gradual experience. So, no, I didn't have any trouble adjusting.
What about nightmares?
Never had them.
Did loud noises bother you?
What?
Did loud noises bother you?
No. I know that a lot of soldiers were troubled with that, had terrible nightmares, and didn't bother me that at all.
What life advice do you want to give to future generations?
Advice?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I tell you, we got to get our government straightened around so we know whether we've got a government. And That's the first thing we've got to do. We've got to have a strong Army. We've got to have a strong Navy and the Marines. And there's no getting around it. My son-in-law, when he first got his as a second lieutenant, that was in the 1970s, he told me, he said the Army was in complete disarray, you know, and what they did, I forget his name. He was a quiz kid on TV for a while. He was a brilliant guy, but he was a stupid soldier. And he took in anybody he could get off the streets to fill the ranks. And there were drunks and there were everything. They were not a first quality Army. And it's taken a long time to get it up to where we've got it now, but I'm fearful that it's deteriorating again. I hope not, but I'm concerned about that.
Do you feel that the younger generations understand all the sacrifices that your generation made?
Oh, I don't know. The younger people, some of them don't even know there was a World War II.
And what's that like for you as someone who literally bled, you know, for his country and had to do things that no one should ever have to do? What is that like, you know, 75 years later to witness some people who just don't even realize that there was a war?
Oh, I don't know. I don't let it bother me.
Not at all?
Not at all. No. I've never been one to say too much about my service, you know, and I'm happy with it, and that's all that matters to me. My family, too, is happy with what I did, and that means the most to me.
What would you want to say to all the men who were killed overseas in World War II? What would you want them to know?
I don't know how to answer that. I don't know. I can't answer that.
Was it all worth it?
Oh, I think World War II was sure worth it, but I'm not sure that the wars we've had since then have all been worth it.
And Mr. Bailey, what kind of person do you want to be remembered as?
What was that?
What kind of person do you want to be remembered as?
Well, just dad. Raised a good family of 6 children. I've got grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and I just want them to know that I did my part and did the best I could, and I want them to remember me, and they will, because I've got a lot of the things I've done out of wood. I've built a lot of furniture and all kinds of other things. And so I can go to any of my children's house and walk in there and see things that I made. And so they'll remember me that way.
Do you want to be remembered as a World War II hero?
It doesn't make any difference to me. I've never been much for the hero business. When I read or hear about some of the soldiers, some terrible things they've had to go through, it makes me feel that I don't really deserve a Silver Star. You know, I don't know if you noticed, but coming up here You went by a hospital. Did you see World War II hospital?
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, the Charles Grace Hospital. That's named after a 18-year-old Cherokee. He was only 18 years old. And I don't know how it happened that there was a live grenade. I don't know if somebody dropped it, had taken the pin out or what, but anyway, he was with a group of his fellow soldiers, and he threw his body on it and took all that, sacrificed his life for his fellow soldiers, you know. Now that's a hero. You know, I have a trouble feeling like a hero.
Just because you weren't killed in the war doesn't mean you aren't a hero.
No, that's true.
But I was going to say, can you tell me about your living conditions in combat?
Well, in France, they weren't really good. Like I say, we slept on, you spread the raincoat, which was as stiff as a board, on the snow, and then set your pup tent and slept on it. But first, if you go out in the woods and get some nice soft branches and put them down, and then so you made a little bit of a mattress, you might say. And so we didn't like to do that. But when we got into Germany, we had the opportunity of being inside, and it was really wonderful.
And how often would you get a chance to take a shower?
Oh, gee. Sometimes it might be 2 months, 2 months. And then a shower consisted of a 55-gallon drum up on a pedestal, and the soldiers that were running the shower, they could turn a little bit of water and come down and get you wet, and you soaped up and rinsed off, and you were done. It was about a 5-minute episode at the longest.
And you would put on the same dirty clothes back on?
Oh, yeah. Lots of times.
Okay, so Mr. Bailey, I'm just going to have you go through again, because last time we talked about your Silver Star, you were looking the other way, and the camera didn't really get it all. If you don't mind, I'm just going to go through with you briefly, in your own words, the Silver Star story, and then we'll be done. Okay?
You're going to say it?
No, I'm going to ask you just some leading questions. So, your most intense combat experience was the incident that ultimately led you receiving the Silver Star. Is that right?
I guess I don't know what you said.
The incident that you received the Silver Star for, that was your most intense combat experience.
Yes.
Right? So just to backtrack a little bit, can you take me through the story from the beginning at the bridge? What were you guys doing?
We were repairing the bridge.
Where was this?
That was in Germany.
And what happened to the bridge?
They apparently had tried to blow part of it, and just part of it was damaged, so it wasn't too difficult to repair.
Do you remember the damage that had been done?
No, I don't know.
But you were in a combat engineer battalion.
Yes.
And so you guys had been sent out to go repair this bridge?
What's that?
You had been ordered to go repair the bridge?
Yes.
Were you guys taking on fire as you were repairing the bridge?
No. We were with Patton's Third Army, and following the tanks, we were racing to the Rhine. And when I got wounded, it was about 35 miles from the Rhine. Yes, we were repairing the bridge. It was wood, and so it wasn't too difficult to repair. And we were preparing it because we knew there'd be vehicles and troops coming across.
And so how long did it take to repair that bridge?
Well, we were there maybe 2 hours.
And is this in the daytime?
No, this was at night. By the time we finished up, it was pitch dark.
Was that common to repair bridges at nighttime?
This what?
Was it common to repair bridges at nighttime?
Anytime, didn't matter day or night.
So, do you know where this was, the bridge?
Yeah, all I know is it's in Germany.
Okay. After you all repaired the bridge, how did you get to the bridge in the first place?
We were following a group of tanks, Patton's tanks, and we were just going along, marching alongside his tanks. And the tanks were moving fast towards the Rhine. And back then they were moving about, that time, about 35 miles a day we were taking.
And so you followed the tanks and they led you to where the bridge was that needed repairing?
No, we saw it, and so they went on, and I stayed behind with one squad and my platoon sergeant.
And what was his name?
Orville Lee.
And you guys have your own truck?
Oh, yes. We had, I don't remember if I had 3 or 4 trucks, but we had a D6 Caterpillar tractor and a large truck and a big trailer that we carried the tank, or carried the D6 Caterpillar tractor, bulldozer.
And you stayed behind with one squad to repair the bridge?
Yes.
Were you ordered to do that, or you just saw a broken down bridge and you decided it needed repairing?
Yes.
So you decided that yourself?
Oh, sure.
It's not like some officer told you, Bailey, go fix that.
No. When you saw damage, you repaired it as you went, unless it was something that was going to take a lot of time. Then you have to have more people.
Okay. So you guys repaired the bridge. When you started, was it nighttime already?
Oh, yes. Dark.
Was there a moon out that night?
No. Fortunately, there wasn't.
And around what time did you finish?
All I know is sometime around midnight.
And then what happened to you all? Where did you guys go from there?
That's when I told the rest of the platoon, my platoon, to follow up, and we would catch up with them.
Who's we? Your squad?
Yeah. Yeah, we would catch up with them. And let's see, what was the question?
I just want to take me through. So after you all fixed the bridge, where did you go, your squad?
Oh, we got in the truck that we had, a 6x6, and I was going to catch up with the rest of the platoon, and that's when I ran into the ambush.
And take me through that ambush. What do you remember? What vehicle were you in?
I was in a Jeep with Carl DeBoard.
Who was Carl DeBoard?
He was my Jeep driver.
And it was just the two of you?
Yes.
Are you leading all the trucks?
Yeah, just the one truck we had, and I was maybe 100 feet ahead of it, ahead of where we got ambushed.
So,
As soon as I knew what was happening, asked to surrender, they stopped the truck immediately and started shooting.
so you're driving along at night. Do you have your headlights on?
Oh no, they had just little small lights on the side. We had a name for them, I can't think what it was.
The blinders were on the lights though, right?
Pardon?
It was blinders that were on the lights?
Yes.
Just to clarify, when you fixed the bridge, it was not the whole platoon, just your squad.
Yes.
You told the rest of the platoon
To go ahead, and they stayed with the tanks, and they didn't have any trouble because they waited until this single vehicle coming, that was the Jeep, me and my driver, and then they fell a tree across the road.
Who?
The Germans.
Okay.
And so I had no choice but to stop.
So you're driving and you see a tree across the road.
Well, we were challenged at the same time.
How did the Germans challenge you?
There were two Germans on Karl de Boer's side of the vehicle. And fortunately, there weren't any on my side. There's just a two on de Boer's side. And they asked us to surrender, and of course we stopped, dead stop, and I just tumbled off into the ditch. And de Boer was trying to come across the seat to get over where I was, and one German on each side, and that's the two Germans that I shot with a .45. And I wasn't the greatest pistol shot in the world, and of course it was pitch dark, and so that one bullet that I killed the one, went skinned right beside my de Boer's ear, and it took a little piece of the ear out. So he said I left a mark on him.
But Mr. Bailey, you guys are challenged by the Germans. At the same time, you see this tree that's been felled across the road, and you tumble out of the Jeep.
Yep.
Immediately, that's your reaction?
Oh, sure. They wanted us to surrender, and wasn't about to do that.
So never for 1 second you thought about just surrendering?
No.
Why not?
We weren't in a surrendering mood. We were ahead, and we had thumbs up, you know. No, we weren't in any position that we wanted to surrender.
How were you able to get out of the Jeep so quickly?
Because there wasn't any door on there. It's a reset. Where there would be a door, it's cut almost down to the floor. So it just tumbled out. And then fortunately, there was a ditch there.
So, Mr. Bailey, you tumble into the ditch. Are you able to see? I mean, can you give me an idea just how dark it is? Can you see your hands in front of your face? I mean...
Oh, you could see something, you know, enough that I had no trouble picking out the target, the two Germans.
So you tumble into the ditch, which is right next to the road.
Mm-hmm.
And as you get up, what do you see going on with Karl de Boer and the two Germans who challenged you guys?
Let's see, well, I killed the two Germans.
But before you shot them, and what did you see, and what were they about to do to Karl de Boer?
We didn't see them until they challenged us.
But I'm saying, you tumbled out of the Jeep, right?
Yep.
When you got back up on your feet, and you looked back at the Jeep?
Oh, no. Stayed right down in the ditch. Didn't stand up, no.
But if you were down in the ditch, how could you see the Germans?
Well, they were right there in front of me. I shot these two. They weren't but about 6 feet away from me.
And you were laying down when you shot them?
Oh, yes.
Okay, see, in my mind's eye, I always thought you were standing.
Oh, no. I was flat on my stomach in the ditch. And I could see good enough to see what I had. 2 targets, and I took advantage of it and shot them both.
How deep was the ditch?
Oh, maybe 4 feet.
Okay, so it's to the point where even if you're at the bottom of the ditch, you can see the Germans.
Oh, yeah.
And so...
It was it wasn't a big, wide road. It was a fairly small, narrow road.
Okay. Like a one-way road.
Yes.
Were the Germans firing at Karl de Boord? Had they started to fire at him?
No. No. All the firing came from off to the right where they shot me. That rifleman was off there.
But did you see the Germans hurting Karl de Boord in any way? Weren't they using their rifle butts to hit him?
Yeah, they tried to hit him and hit him across the shoulder. And as far as I know, he suffered from that the rest of his life.
Can you say that again? Say who hit who?
Yeah, and the Germans, one of them, and I never could understand why they didn't use their rifle and shoot, but the one used I suppose, held on to the barrel and clubbed him, tried to club him, I think, probably over the head, but they missed and hit him on the shoulder.
Hit who?
Karl de Boord.
Did you see that happen? The German using the rifle as a club?
No, I saw him. The first I saw him was when they were in sight I shot them both.
Before you fired at the Germans, did you hesitate at all?
Oh, no. No. As soon as I had a target, I took advantage of it.
And do you remember where you aimed at the Germans, on their bodies, where you aimed?
Well, I wasn't aiming. I was aiming at their body. And as I say, I wasn't the greatest pistol shot in the world. And of course, it being dark and everything, I don't know where I hit the one on the left side, but the one on the right, I must have just hit up about head height, because I took a little piece of his ear, and so I must have shot that German there in the head.
The German on the left, you don't know where you hit him.
No.
But the German on the right?
Yeah.
Where do you think you hit him and why?
Well, I know I must have hit him right in the head, because I took a piece of de Boord's ear. And they're probably, I don't know that it was same height or not, but must have been fairly close.
During this entire time, is Karl de Boord still in the Jeep?
The what?
Is Karl de Boord still in the Jeep this entire time?
Oh, no, he was trying to get over, he was lying flat on his stomach, trying to crawl over the seats to get in where I was.
So but during this incident, he was in the Jeep. He was still in the Jeep when you shot the 2 Germans?
No. He was coming across, he was lying across the back of the seats. And so he was down some, and anyway, I just shot both of them.
And I mean, this was the closest. How close would you say you were to the Germans when you?
Probably 6 feet.
Say that again.
Probably about 6 feet.
So almost as close as you and I.
Yes.
It was point blank.
Oh yes, I couldn't miss.
And so, but the only thing between you and the Germans was the body of the Jeep, correct?
Yes.
Because you were on your side of the Jeep and they were on de Boord's side.
Yes. De Boord was trying to come over where I was.
And as he was trying to come over, the Germans were clubbing him.
Yeah, just hit him, slugged him, hit him that one time, and In the meantime, I shot both of them.
I mean, you seem like such a friendly person. I mean, you seem like such a friendly person, Mr. Bailey. What was that like for you to have to shoot these two Germans?
It didn't bother me a bit.
Because?
Pardon?
Because why not?
Well, because they were enemy, and so you don't worry about the enemy. You shoot them, you shoot them.
And they would have shot you?
Yes, indeed.
So, I mean, when you're fighting for your life, you're able to do things you never thought possible.
That's right.
And so after these two Germans, you shot them, was it just like a psh, psh, like, was it immediately one after another?
Yeah, it just took a second or two to shoot one and then shoot the other one.
Okay. And then what happens?
Then DeBoard, he got over in the ditch and he started back, and I stayed right there, which was foolish. I should have started back myself, because I stayed there shooting until I'd shot the bullets that were in the 45, and I was in the process of reaching in my field jacket to get an extra clip that was full, and getting ready to put in the 45 when that German shot me.
What German?
The enemy, he was off to the right in the head.
So after you shot those two first Germans, what were you firing at with the rest of your clip?
Just random. I could see objects, and I don't know if I hit anybody or not. Like I say, it wasn't a great pistol shot.
But you could see, figures?
Yeah, but I don't know if I did any damage. But I know I killed those two Germans that stopped us.
So you're just shooting at these figures that you're seeing, and then what happens to you?
Well, you mean after I got shot?
No, tell me about that. So you're after you shot the two Germans, you empty the rest of your clip, firing.
Yep.
And then what happens as you're getting into your field jacket for another clip?
Yeah, that's when I got shot.
And who do you think it was that shot you?
Well, it was a rifleman, because I know it was a rifle bullet, and it was off to my right and some distance ahead. That's why the bullet went in at an angle, because I had my feet apparently spread, and so the bullet caught just, actually went right, must have gone right beside my body, and so I'm lucky I didn't get hit in the head, because it went in at an angle. That's why it did what it did to my leg.
And where did it enter your foot?
Just above my ankle, just on the right foot.
Mr. Bailey? So after it entered right above your ankle, where was the exit?
Out the bottom of my foot, the arch.
So it literally went through your foot?
Yes. And the bullet kept right on going then. I don't know where it went.
What was the pain like?
It was terrific. It felt like I stepped on a electrical wire, and a shock. And so, because that bullet, when it goes through the bone and all those nerves in there, and I let a big yelp out of me when that happened. And it hurt just instantaneously, and then my foot went dead.
How is that German able to see you? Is it because you were firing and they could see where the shots were coming?
Yes, I was foolish in staying right there at that spot. I should have started back, and that way they wouldn't have known where I was, because it was dark.
What happened to the German who shot you?
I don't know.
Was there anyone else, other Americans, who joined you in firing at the Germans?
Not then, because when I let out the big yelp, all my platoon, they started back down towards the other, where we had observed the other engineer group, and because they figured I'd been killed. So I was left all by myself.
So you were the only one firing at the Germans? Everyone else left you?
Yep.
Not a single other American joined in firing at the Germans with you?
No. As soon as I shot them, the firing stopped, and it was quiet.
You mean after you were shot, that the firing stopped?
Well,
when you were shot, you were laying down, correct?
oh yes.
What do you remember about the blood loss?
I didn't remember anything about it. I still don't know how much, because I had combat boots on, and that, of course, supported my ankle, because I walked on it almost a mile. I broke my heel, so everything was busted.
So you were left all alone, and where did you walk back to?
I crawled back down the ditch until I saw the 6x6 truck, and I saw somebody behind it. And so I crawled out there, and it was Orville
Lee.
Orville, no, behind the Jeep, behind the 6x6, the rear duels, it was Orville Greenfield. And he was in sort of a daze. And so as soon as he saw me, he says, "Is that you, Lieutenant?" And I said, "Yes." And I said, "Who is that out lying on the road?" And we crawled out there to look, and it was Sergeant Lee. And wasn't anything we could do for him. And so then we crawled back into the ditch and started back towards where we had observed the engineering group just not too long before that.
But Mr. Bailey, what happened to Sergeant Lee?
Sergeant Lee was killed instantly. When I heard it, they threw a potato masher, and
the Germans?
The Germans. And one of the pieces of the shell went apparently right into his heart. I only found that afterwards, of course.
But when you went to look at him, he was dead?
Oh, yes.
I mean, how could you tell? He just wasn't responding? How do you know? Because if it was dark...
Oh, you could see that he had no movement. He was dead.
And tell me about the personality of Sergeant Lee. What kind of person was he?
Oh, he was a great guy. Everybody liked him. He didn't have an enemy in the world.
How old would you say he was when he was killed?
Well, I have no way of knowing, but he was in his 20s.
And where was he from? Michigan.
Yeah, Michigan, but I was trying to think.
Battle Creek.
Yeah, Battle Creek, Michigan.
And so you see him, he's dead. What happened to Carl DeBoard? Is he missing now?
Yeah, he's already crawled back. He's gone.
Were there any other casualties besides you and Sergeant Lee?
No, because Orville Greenfield and I were the only two that were still up there where we got ambushed. And so then the two of us, we escaped down back to the engineering group.
And you had to crawl and walk?
I did after about 200 feet. He asked me if I could walk, and I said, "Let's see if I can." And so I stood up and put my arm around his neck, and because he was a big man, and with his help, I walked with him, and we didn't have any further incident. And we got by those two that German that challenged us.
Tell me what happened. So as he was helping you go back to the American unit,
yeah,
what happened to you guys?
Orville.
Mm-hmm.
He was from a German family, and then they only spoke German in the household. So he grew up speaking German. And as soon as we were challenged by the man that was up on the side of the hill, he responded right away. He says, "No, we're chasing the Americans," in German. And we just kept right on crawling, and there wasn't anything more happened.
So, Mr. Bailey, this is a different German that challenged you. As you and Orville, the German, were going back to the American lines, there was another German that challenged you?
Just the one that was up on the side of the bank of the ditch, and that was all.
When you heard that other German challenge you,
oh, no.
What was going on in your mind?
Oh, we were just trying to get back where we could get out of this mess we were in.
And so you make it past the German.
Yep, he bought it. We said, no, we're chasing the Americans. We just kept right on going, and we didn't hear another word. No more shooting, there was nothing.
And then how far do you guys travel?
Back?
Yeah.
Oh, it was almost a mile.
And walking that mile on your foot that had been shot, what did that do to you?
It broke my heel, because I didn't have the support of the ankle, any support. And so the only thing, it was all the weight was going on my heel, and my heel broke, so everything was busted.
And that German who challenged you on the hill, how close was he to the two of you?
Oh, he must have been up there 40 feet maybe.
And so where do you guys make it back to? Is it a first aid station, or is it...
No, there was a armored half-track unit up there. They were engineers.
And then what did they saw you, and then what happened?
Well, we went down the middle of the road, and when we got close, we were challenged for the password. And so I yelled out, "I don't know the password, but we're Americans, and we are in trouble, and we want to come back, get in." And the American soldier that challenged, he says, "Well, advance carefully," or slowly, he said, slowly. And so we did, and we didn't have any trouble.
And where they took you to the first aid station, or?
They had a first aid man there in that group, and then the next morning they flew me to England, where they operated on my ankle and foot and arch, put it all back together again.
Yeah, and tell me about the rehab that they made you do in England. The rehabilitation?
No, I never got to that point. After they put a cast on, and then I went back to England on a hospital ship, one that you've seen pictures where they're all painted white with a big red cross on the side, and all lit up at night, and it worried me some, because we were still at war with the Japanese, and I thought, now this would be a great time to get torpedoed, but we didn't have any trouble. But it did take 10 days to go back on that old hospital ship.
And because of your injury, was your foot always wrapped up? I mean, could you walk around with crutches, or?
Oh, they had. I was in and out of quite a few different casts, and they finally put a walking cast on. That's a little rubber deal that they put on the heel so you can pivot on it, And so I had that for a while, and then I finally graduated to crutches, and you get used to it. It hurt for a while, but pretty soon you're so anxious to get it fixed and fixed up again. You're anxious, so I put up with any pain. Just takes time for when you put the weight down on all those broken bones.
And that was the war. I mean, you make it back to the States, and you visit your wife again. But you said you were in hospitals for about a year.
Yep.
Is this in Michigan?
Yes, but it isn't as bad as it sounds, because I was able to, on crutches and the walking cast, I was able, after about 6 months, I was able to go home anytime I wanted. And so I could go home for a week at a time, then check back into the hospital.
You were back in the States when the war ended with Japan.
Yes.
What do you remember about that? I mean, that was the end of the worst war in the history of humanity.
Yep. Well, I couldn't. I was in a veterans hospital in Rome, Georgia, and it came over the radio, and it was just unbelievable. It was just almost hard to believe, but it didn't take long. You found out that it was true. It was unbelievable.
What do you think about the use of the atomic bombs?
Oh, I think that was a great thing. I think that Truman made a great decision when he said that we're going to drop the bomb, because it saved, in the long run, sure, killed a lot of Japanese, but all I can think of is it saved a lot of American lives too.
Yeah.
And they would have fought to a bitter end. They were terrible people. You know, they dug themselves down into the caves, and they weren't going to give up, and you had to kill them off. And we set off the first bomb, and they didn't react. Well, they reacted, but not the way we wanted. And so Truman said, drop the second one. Well, after we dropped the second one, that got their attention.
Yeah.
And he says, he said, the next one we're going to drop on Tokyo. And so then they surrendered. And I'm not sure that we had the third one, but maybe we did.
Can you tell me, Mr. Bailey, you had come home, from the war, and you eventually became an engineer, right?
Yeah, well, I had a degree in engineering.
Before the war?
Before I went.
But, you were doing work as an engineer.
Yeah.
A lot of the people, men your age, were coming back to the civilian life, working.
Hard to get a job.
It
was hard to find a job.
Oh, was that difficult, even with the college degree?
Didn't make any difference. For, I think about someplace between 3 and 6 months, I worked in a greenhouse for something to do, and I was making $20 a week. And I was happy to have the job until the opening came for me to get into General Motors.
But when you would meet other guys or other men your age, would you guys talk about the war, or was it just something that was behind you?
People I ran into, they weren't in the war. I was I didn't know anybody else that had been in the war.
Did you ever go to the division reunions? Did you ever go to the 94th Division reunions?
Just once.
Where was that?
In Detroit.
And how was it?
Oh, I enjoyed, I saw some of the people that were in my platoon, and most of the people I didn't know. And so I only went one time.
Did you stay in touch with a lot of the men from your company?
No.
None of them?
No.
How long was it before you saw Carl de Boord again?
I think it was 63 years, something. It was in the 60s. It was over 60 years.
And what was the reason you and him reunited?
See, I remember where we were, but I don't remember why we were.
It was because of the Silver Star.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. He found out, I guess, it was a Silver Star, and he found out, I don't know how, that I was going to be presented, and so he wanted to come, and he lived a ways away in Michigan, or no, he was, I'm not sure. He might have been in Michigan. Anyway, he heard about it, and he got word to me. He said, "Don't worry, I'm going to make it," because he was dying of cancer, and they only expected him to live about 30 days at the most. But he just inspired him, and it was, he made it to the reunion. He saw me get the Silver Star. He saw Gil get his first star as a brigadier general, and he died in 30 days after that.
So can you explain something to me, Mr. Bailey? When I read the article, the news story about that ceremony, I thought it was Carl de Boord who petitioned to get you the Silver Star. Is that not right?
No, that was my son. Well,
Paul.
The paperwork, when I was discharged, I was recommended by my captain and the colonel that I get a Silver Star. And somebody along the way saw that. I didn't know him. They didn't know me. Said, "Oh, he doesn't deserve that. He only deserves a Bronze Star." And so first I did get the Bronze Star. And it took 7 years. My son Paul heard that they reviewed a lot of paperwork, and if it was something wasn't right, you could get it changed. And so it took him 7 years, almost, and a little over 7 years, until I got it.
I mean, did that bother you? Because from the story that we've been told by you, I mean, you were the only one doing the fighting. The rest of the guys left, but they got Silver Stars.
Yep.
But you got a Bronze Star. I mean, after the war, did that really bother you?
Yes, it did. But I figured, what the heck, it doesn't make any difference now. But my son Paul, he said, "I'm going to see what I can do about that." And between Lieutenant General Black and Mary Jo and her husband Gil and Paul, it took 7 years. All of them worked on it, and I finally got it.
And what does that Silver Star mean to you?
Well, it means that I guess I did something special, but so many people did so much more than I did that I know a lot of people that got Bronze Stars or didn't get any that should have had Silver Stars.
What do you mean?
Well, gee, when somebody throws their body on a grenade so that save their comrades, and some of the terrible fighting that went on, a lot of them deserved it. They never got it.
Are you talking about the man who they named the hospital after? I think he got the Medal of Honor. I'm pretty sure he got the Medal of Honor.
Yeah, Charles George, the one that this hospital down the road is named after.
But either way, I'm very happy you got the Silver Star, and it's such an honor to meet you, Mr. Bailey. I don't know how Carl DeBoer got a Silver Star, if he ran away.
No.
But, I mean, did you recommend him for a Silver Star?
No.
How did he...
I did nothing.
How did he get one?
I had no... Somebody wrote it up and they got it. I didn't have anything to do with it. You get used to those things.
Wait, can you say that again? So when you were younger, what did you hate?
I hated to go to a funeral, even. See a dead person in a casket. And I'd think about it at night, you know, especially. But after you're in the war, you see Germans stacked up like cordwood, frozen solid, you know, so they didn't litter things. There was a big hole in the ground right at the main, just a 2-lane, and they crossed. It was like an X, and there was a hole, a deep hole on the center. And it was so precise, you knew a bomb hadn't been dropped to cause that. So we knew that the Germans had deliberately mined it and blew it to blow that big hole. Well, I had to find something to fill up that hole because we had tanks coming.
How big of a hole was it?
Oh, it was a deep, must have been 10 feet deep and 20 feet in diameter.
And this was in some town in Germany, or?
Yes, in Germany. And so I looked around and there was this beautiful old building on the corner, and it was stone, beautiful old house. And I thought, that's got to come down to fill up that hole. And so I went in, told the people in the house that they better vacate and take anything they wanted because it was going to come down. And this one woman came out, and to me, she was an old woman, but when you're in your 20s, you know, 40 looks old. Anyway, she pleaded with me, and she cried, and I felt so sorry for her, but I said, you started the war, we didn't start it, and I've got to fill up that hole. And so I told the Jeep driver, my bulldozer Caterpillar tractor, and I said, take knock it down. So they took it down in pieces, and we filled up that hole. And so when the tanks came along, they could continue right on their way.
Well, was that a common practice, to blow up buildings and use the rubble for...
Oh, no. It was just one of those things when you're in the engineers especially, you learn to improvise.
And so the entire building came down?
Pardon?
The entire building came down?
Oh, yeah, we took it right down and took the whole building.
How long did you guys give them to get their stuff?
About 10 minutes. Because I had to get it down. I couldn't have a lot of time to wait for them to pack up and everything. I just told them to take what you want because it's coming down.
But did you guys just bulldoze it, or did you blow it up first?
No, we just put the bulldozer to the corners and it collapsed. It was a beautiful old building. And I suppose many generations of Germans probably were born and raised in that house. But
like you said, they started the war.
Yep.
Were you afraid of getting killed when you were overseas?
Me?
Yeah?
No, you get used to it. You get pretty chevalier, you know. Figure if it's going to happen, it's going to happen. No, I never was afraid. The only time I was afraid was when I was left all alone there in the dark in Germany, and how am I going to get out of this mess?
How long was the whole ordeal?
What?
That whole ordeal? It must have been, what, a couple hours?
Oh, no. How long was...
The whole incident with the shooting and everything?
Oh, yeah, it would be, I think probably an hour would be.
Wow.
It happened fast.
It's an honor to meet you, Mr. Bailey.
Oh, thank you for coming out.
And I really appreciate you taking the time.
Oh,
And no matter what happens, you know, never forget that if it wasn't for people like you, I wouldn't be here today.
oh yeah.
I mean that, and
Yeah,
not just me, but millions of other people.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be
yeah.
here.
I mean, you've given lots of people an opportunity at a full and a free life,
Yep.
and no one can ever take that away from
Oh,
you.
that's right.
And I'll always remember you as a hero,
Okay.
whether you like it or not.
Okay.
It was an honor meeting you, and thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, okay. Well, thank you for coming out.
And it's just a pleasure.